For 500 years, we have been told a singular story about the birth of the modern world. We are taught that in 1492, a Genoese explorer named Christopher Columbus set sail into the unknown, braving the ocean of darkness to accidentally stumble upon a new world. This narrative is the cornerstone of Western history. But what if this cornerstone is a fabrication? What if the discovery was actually a destination that had been charted, mapped, and visited centuries before the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria ever left the docks of Spain? Today, we are dismantling the myth. We are looking at the suppressed evidence that suggests the Moors, the polymaths, navigators, and scientists of North and West Africa, charted the Americas long before the Renaissance even began. This isn't just a different version of history, it is a restoration of the truth. We are exploring 7 undeniable clues that prove the Moors were here first. Clue number 1. The mastery of the seas and the impossible maps. To understand how the Moors could have reached the Americas, we have to look at their level of science compared to Europe at the time. While much of Europe was in the Dark Ages, the Moorish Empire in Al-Andalus in North Africa was the global center of mathematics, astronomy, and cartography. They didn't just sail, they calculated. They perfected the astrolabe, a device that allowed sailors to determine their latitude by the stars. They understood the Earth was a sphere when most of the world still feared falling off the edge. Consider the Piri Reis map. Compiled in 1513 by a Turkish admiral but based on much older, lost, charts from the Moorish and Alexandrian libraries, this map shows the coastline of South America and even Antarctica with stunning accuracy. It shows the longitudinal relationship between Africa and the Americas perfectly, something Columbus couldn't have calculated with the tools he had. The Moors knew the currents. They knew the conveyor belt of the Atlantic, the North Equatorial Current that pulls a ship from the coast of Africa directly to the Caribbean. They didn't need luck, they had the math. Clue number 2. The Mandinka voyages of the Mali Empire. History books often focus on Mansa Musa, the richest man in history, but they rarely talk about his predecessor, Abu Bakr II. In the year 1311, nearly 2 centuries before Columbus, the Emperor of Mali abdicated his throne to explore the limits of the Atlantic Ocean. According to oral traditions and the writings of Arab historians like al-Umari, Abu Bakr equipped an initial fleet of 200 ships filled with men and another 200 filled with gold, water, and supplies. When only one ship returned, claiming they had found a river in the middle of the ocean, which we now know as the Gulf Stream, Abu Bakr did not give up. He led a second expedition of 2,000 ships. He sailed west and never returned to Africa. For centuries, this was dismissed as a legend. But when you look at the evidence in the Americas, the legend becomes a reality. When Columbus arrived in the Caribbean, he reported seeing black traders from the south and east. He even sent samples of gold-tipped spears found in the possession of the natives back to Spain. The Spanish metallurgists tested them and found they were made of guanin, an 18-karat gold alloy identical to the gold being produced in West Africa at the exact same time. Clue number 3. Arabic topography and the names of the land. Language is a footprint that is very hard to erase. If a culture visits a place, they leave their names behind. Throughout the Americas, there are hundreds of place names that have roots not in indigenous languages or European Spanish, but in Arabic. In the journals of early explorers, we find references to places like Medina in the Bahamas. We see the name Marajo in Brazil, which echoes the Arabic word for pasture. Even the name California has long been debated by etymologists. Many scholars point to the 16th century Spanish novel Las Surgas de Esplandian, which describes an island of black women ruled by a queen named Calafia. The word Calafia is a direct derivative of Khalifa, the Arabic word for a caliph or leader. Why would the Spanish use Islamic titles to describe the American landscape unless they were encountering a reality that already existed? In North America, we see names like Tallahassee, which in some dialects translates to Allah will deliver you, in a mixture of Arabic and local tongues. These aren't coincidences, they are linguistic fossils. Clue number 4. Pre-Columbian Islamic inscriptions. If the Moors were here, they would have left their writing. And they did. In the arid deserts of the American Southwest, Nevada, Arizona, and California, archaeologists have found petroglyphs and inscriptions that are not Native American in origin. Professor Barry Fell of Harvard University documented numerous instances of Kufic Arabic script carved into rocks. These inscriptions, dating hundreds of years before Columbus, include phrases like, "In the name of Allah," and "Muhammad is the messenger of God." In some cases, these inscriptions were found alongside depictions of schools and navigational diagrams. Even more shocking is the evidence found among the Cherokee and Mi'kmaq tribes. The Mi'kmaq people of Nova Scotia had a writing system that bore a startling resemblance to Egyptian and North African scripts. Early Jesuit missionaries were baffled by the fact that some indigenous groups were already familiar with the concept of a single, unseen creator and had symbols that mirrored the crescent and star. Clue number: biological and cultural exchanges. Long before the Columbian exchange was supposed to have started, plants and animals were already moving between the continents. Take the case of the sweet potato and the bottle gourd. These are plants native to the Americas that appeared in Polynesia and Africa long before 1492. But the most telling piece of evidence is maize, or corn. While corn is indigenous to Mexico, Arabic records from the 12th century describe a grain called kabsh, which matches the description of maize being grown in the regions ruled by the Moors. Furthermore, look at the Olmec heads of Mexico. These massive stone sculptures, dating back to 1200 BCE, feature unmistakably African facial features, broad noses, full lips, and braided hair. While some historians try to claim these are just stylized, indigenous faces, the resemblance to the people of the Nile Valley in West Africa is too precise to ignore. The Moors were part of a long lineage of African maritime tradition that had been crossing the Atlantic since the time of the pharaohs. Clue number 6. The testimony of Columbus himself. The best evidence against the Columbus myth often comes from Columbus's own pen. In his journals, he frequently mentions the presence of Moors, or people dressed like Moors. He noted that the indigenous people of the Caribbean wore colorful cotton head wraps and tunics that were identical to the styles seen in Grenada. He also described seeing mosques, or buildings that looked like mosques on the coastlines of Cuba and Hispaniola. Critics say he was just hallucinating or using familiar terms to describe the unfamiliar, but why would a seasoned navigator constantly use Islamic terminology unless he recognized the cultural markers? Furthermore, we have to look at who was on the ships with Columbus. His lead navigator for the Nina was a man named Pedro Alonso Nino, who was of Moorish descent. The Spanish knew they needed the Moorish knowledge of the stars and the hidden lands to make the voyage. Columbus didn't discover the way, he followed a map that the Moors had already drawn. Clue number 7. The Great Suppression. If all this evidence exists, why isn't it in our textbooks? The answer lies in the 1492 Reconquista and the subsequent Inquisition. In 1492, the same year Columbus sailed, the last Moorish stronghold in Granada fell to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. The Spanish crown was obsessed with erasing Islamic influence from the peninsula. They burned millions of Arabic manuscripts. They destroyed libraries that contained centuries of geographical and scientific knowledge. When the Spanish reached the Americas, they applied the same scorched earth policy. They burned the Mayan codices, thousands of books that contained the history and science of the indigenous people. They needed to create a narrative of discovery to justify their colonial land grabs and the spread of the church. To acknowledge that the Moors, their sworn enemies, had already been there, trading and living in peace with the natives, would have undermined their entire claim to the New World. History is written by the victors, and in this case, the victors spent 500 years scrubbing the Moorish footprint from the map of the Americas. The 1492 narrative is more than just a historical error, it is a psychological tool designed to make us believe that civilization and exploration are exclusively Western inventions. But the clues are everywhere. They are in the wind currents of the Atlantic, the gold of the Mali Empire, the Arabic names of our cities, and the very DNA of the people who inhabited this land before the first European boot touched the sand. The Moors didn't just stumble upon America, they charted it, they mapped it, and they integrated with it. It is time to stop celebrating a discovery and start honoring a connection that is much older, much deeper, and much more diverse than we were ever told. The myth of Columbus is dying. The truth of the Moors is rising. We are not just uncovering the past, we are reclaiming a stolen legacy. The map of the world is being redrawn, and this time, the ink is being provided by the people who were actually there. The ocean of darkness was never dark to the Moors, it was a bridge. And it's time we walk across that bridge to see the world as it truly was.